I was 19 when the world went sideways, not in a metaphorical way, but literally. A drunk driver, a sharp curve, and then just pain. 7 years later, I was 26, and the phantom ache in my leg was a constant reminder, a dull throb that echoed the one in my chest. My name is Scarlett. For most of my adult life, I'd been a ghost in my own home, a burden my mother, Cassandra, and my older sister, Lacey, never let me forget. "Are you going to just sit there all day, Scarlett?" Cassandra, who was 57, would sigh, her voice dripping with a martyr's resignation. "Some of us have lives to live. We can't just lie around recovering forever." Lacey, 31, would usually chime in from the couch, scrolling through her phone. "Yeah, Mom's right. It's been, 7 years? You'd think you'd be over it by now. It's not like we got a payout for all the trouble." That was their favorite line. All the trouble. As if my shattered femur, the multiple surgeries, the years of physical therapy, and the constant blinding headaches were an inconvenience to them. They'd parade me out for church sympathy, accepting casseroles and pitying glances, while at home I was just dead weight, another mouth to feed, another reason for them to complain. I learned to be quiet, to be invisible. It was easier than fighting. Then, last Tuesday, a letter arrived. A thick envelope from the law firm. My car accident settlement, $12,000. It wasn't life-changing money, not really, but it was mine. It was a key, a small, rusty key, but a key nonetheless, to a door I'd been dreaming of opening for years. Independence, a chance to finally get out from under their suffocating roof. I deposited the check that same afternoon. I even allowed myself a small, private smile. For the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. I imagined a tiny apartment, a used car, maybe even a community college class. A life where I wasn't constantly reminded of what I'd cost them. That hope lasted exactly 3 days. Before we continue, drop a comment with where you're watching from. I love seeing my global reach. On Friday morning, I logged into my bank app. My heart seized. The balance was 0. Not a penny. My breath hitched. I refreshed the screen, thinking it was a glitch. It wasn't. The account was drained. Every single dollar. My hands trembled as I scrolled through the transaction history. One large withdrawal, an ATM withdrawal for the maximum daily limit, followed by an online transfer. Both dated yesterday. Both from my own account. I stumbled out of my room, clutching my phone like a lifeline. Lacey was in the living room, painting her nails, a new designer handbag sitting beside her on the couch. Cassandra was at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, reading a magazine. "My money," I choked out, tears already blurring my vision. "My settlement, it's gone." Lacey barely looked up. "Oh, that? Yeah, I took it." She blew on her nails. "Mom said it was fine." My gaze snapped to Cassandra. She met my eyes, a faint, almost imperceptible smirk playing on her lips. "Well, Scarlett, we did raise you. And after everything we've been through with your accident, it's the least you could do, really." The least I could do? My voice cracked. "It was my money." "For my injuries." Lacey finally looked at me, a cold, dismissive laugh bubbling up. "Oh, please, don't be so dramatic. It's not like you were going to do anything useful with it anyway. We deserve it for raising you." Cassandra nodded, her smirk widening. "Exactly. Think of it as repayment. For all the years, all the doctor's visits, all the sympathy we had to endure." They both laughed then, a light, airy sound that felt like a punch to my gut. My tears streamed down my face, hot and humiliating. They watched me unbothered, as if my heartbreak was a minor inconvenience, a childish tantrum. I backed away, stumbled back into my room, and slammed the door. I curled up on my bed, the sobs racking my body. It wasn't just the money. It was the absolute casual cruelty of it. The complete lack of remorse. The way they twisted everything, making me feel like the villain for even expecting what was mine. Hours later, the tears dried, replaced by a cold, hard knot in my stomach. I was still lying there, staring at the ceiling, when I remembered something. Lacey had been bragging about a spa day yesterday. A really fancy one, she'd said. I got up, my legs stiff, and went to the bathroom. Lacey's purse was on the counter. I rummaged through it, my fingers trembling, until I found it. A receipt from Serenity Springs Luxury Spa. Dated yesterday. The total was nearly $300. My eyes narrowed. The tears were gone, replaced by something else. Something sharp and dangerous. I pulled out my phone, opened the camera, and took a picture of the receipt. Then I went back to my bank app, took screenshots of the drained account, the withdrawal, the transfer. They thought I was broken. They thought I was just going to cry and accept it. They were wrong. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was planning. The next morning, I put on my best blank face. The tears were gone, but the ache remained, a dull, persistent throb that had nothing to do with my old injury. Lacey, 31, was still sprawled on the couch, watching morning TV. Cassandra, 57, was in the kitchen making toast. I walked in, poured myself some coffee, and sat down at the table. "Morning," I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Cassandra glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She probably expected more tears, more drama. Lacey just grunted from the living room. "You okay, Scarlett?" Cassandra asked, a hint of caution in her tone. I shrugged, forcing a weak smile. "Yeah, just a lot to process. I guess you're right. It's done. What's done is done." Lacey appeared in the doorway, chewing on a piece of toast. Her eyes narrowed. "So, you're not going to be all dramatic about it?" "What's the point?" I said, looking down at my coffee cup. "You guys made your decision. I just have to live with it, I guess." It was a lie, of course. Every word was a lie. But it was a necessary one. I watched their faces relax, a subtle shift in their posture. They bought it. They thought I was defeated. Good. Let them think that. The following Monday, I took the bus to the bank. It was the same branch where I'd deposited the settlement check just a week and a half ago. I walked up to the counter and asked to speak to Ruby Blake. She was 29, just a few years older than me, and had helped me with the deposit. She had a kind face, and I remembered her being patient when I'd had trouble filling out the forms because my hands still cramped sometimes. "Scarlett, right?" Ruby said, her smile warm. "How can I help you today?" "Hi, Ruby," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need some help. I'm trying to get all my financial records in order, for personal reasons, and I noticed some unusual activity on my account. I was hoping you could help me get a detailed printout of all transactions from the last 2 weeks, and maybe explain some of the larger withdrawals." Ruby nodded, her expression turning serious as she pulled up my account. "Okay, let's take a look." She clicked around on her computer. "I see a large deposit here, and then, yes, a significant ATM withdrawal and an online transfer a few days later." "That's what I'm confused about," I said, leaning in slightly. "I didn't make those." "Not the large ones, anyway. Is there any way to see more details? Like, where the online transfer went, or if there was a digital signature used?" Ruby typed for a moment, then frowned. "The online transfer went to an account at a different bank, but it's under a name I can't disclose without a subpoena." "However," she paused, her finger hovering over the screen, "I can tell you that the digital signature used for this transfer doesn't match the one we have on file for you, and it was initiated from a device and IP address not typically associated with your account activity." My heart hammered. "So, it was unauthorized?" Ruby looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. "It certainly appears to be. This is highly suspicious, Scarlett. If you didn't authorize these, it's a clear case of fraud. And the ATM withdrawal also looks like it maxed out the daily limit, which isn't your usual pattern. She printed out a stack of papers. Here are all the transactions. I've highlighted the suspicious ones. You should definitely report this to the authorities if you believe it's fraud. Thank you, Ruby, I said, gathering the papers. This is exactly what I needed. I'm just trying to understand everything before I figure out my next steps. I left the bank, the printouts clutched in my hand. The cold knot in my stomach tightened, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a growing sense of purpose. Ruby's words echoed in my head. Clear case of fraud. Highly suspicious. Back home, I spread the papers out on my bed. The ATM withdrawal was for $1,000. The online transfer was for $11,000. And there, buried in the smaller transactions, was a $500 charge to the Velvet Rope Club. My fingers flew to my phone. Lacey had posted a blurry photo on Instagram just a few nights ago, tagging herself at the Velvet Rope Club with a caption about bottle service and good vibes. The date on her post matched the transaction date exactly. I wasn't grieving anymore. The tears were a distant memory. My mind was sharp, focused. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. But every piece of paper, every screenshot, every detail I uncovered was a brick in a wall I was building. A wall that would eventually come crashing down on them. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water, when I heard Lacey's voice from the living room. She was on the phone, her voice low, conspiratorial. Yeah, Ashton, I know, but it's fine. We still have enough. The leftover money from Scarlett's little windfall will cover it. Maldives, here we come. My hand froze on the water tap. Maldives. Honeymoon. Soon. The words hit me like a physical blow, but instead of pain, there was a surge of icy resolve. They were planning to use my money for their dream vacation. My stolen future. Their luxury. A small, dangerous smile touched my lips. Oh, it was happening soon, all right. Just not in the way they imagined. The next morning, I put on my best blank face. The tears were gone, but the ache remained. A dull, persistent throb that had nothing to do with my old injury. Lacey, 31, was still sprawled on the couch watching morning TV. Cassandra, 57, was in the kitchen making toast. I walked in, poured myself some coffee, and sat down at the table. Morning, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. Cassandra glanced at me, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She probably expected more tears, more drama. Lacey just grunted from the living room. You okay, Scarlett? Cassandra asked, a hint of caution in her tone. I shrugged, forcing a weak smile. Yeah, just a lot to process. I guess you're right. It's done. What's done is done. Lacey appeared in the doorway, chewing on a piece of toast. Her eyes narrowed. So, you're not going to be all dramatic about it? What's the point? I said, looking down at my coffee cup. You guys made your decision. I just have to live with it, I guess. It was a lie, of course. Every word was a lie. But it was a necessary one. I watched their faces relax, a subtle shift in their posture. They bought it. They thought I was defeated. Good. Let them think that. The following Monday, I took the bus to the bank. It was the same branch where I'd deposited the settlement check just a week and a half ago. I walked up to the counter and asked to speak to Ruby Blake. She was 29, just a few years older than me, and had helped me with the deposit. She had a kind face, and I remembered her being patient when I'd had trouble filling out the forms, because my hands still cramped sometimes. Scarlett, right? Ruby said, her smile warm. How can I help you today? Hi, Ruby, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I need some help. I'm trying to get all my financial records in order for personal reasons. and I noticed some unusual activity on my account. I was hoping you could help me get a detailed printout of all transactions from the last 2 weeks, and maybe explain some of the larger withdrawals. Ruby nodded, her expression turning serious as she pulled up my account. Okay, let's take a look. She clicked around on her computer. I see a large deposit here, and then, yes, a significant ATM withdrawal and an online transfer a few days later. That's what I'm confused about, I said, leaning in slightly. I didn't make those. Not the large ones, anyway. Is there any way to see more details? Like, where the online transfer went, or if there was a digital signature used? Ruby typed for a moment, then frowned. The online transfer went to an account at a different bank, but it's under a name I can't disclose without a subpoena. However, she paused, her finger hovering over the screen, I can tell you that the digital signature used for this transfer doesn't match the one we have on file for you, and it was initiated from a device and IP address not typically associated with your account activity. My heart hammered. So it was unauthorized? Ruby looked at me, her brow furrowed with concern. It certainly appears to be. This is highly suspicious, Scarlett. If you didn't authorize these, it's a clear case of fraud, and the ATM withdrawal also looks like it maxed out the daily limit, which isn't your usual pattern. She printed out a stack of papers. Here are all the transactions. I've highlighted the suspicious ones. You should definitely report this to the authorities if you believe it's fraud. Thank you, Ruby, I said, gathering the papers. This is exactly what I needed. I'm just trying to understand everything before I figure out my next steps. I left the bank, the printouts clutched in my hand. The cold knot in my stomach tightened, but it wasn't from fear anymore. It was from a growing sense of purpose. Ruby's words echoed in my head. Clear case of fraud. Highly suspicious. Back home, I spread the papers out on my bed. The ATM withdrawal was for $1,000. The online transfer was for $11,000. And there, buried in the smaller transactions, was a $500 charge to the Velvet Rope Club. My fingers flew to my phone. Lacey had posted a blurry photo on Instagram just a few nights ago, tagging herself at the Velvet Rope Club with a caption about bottle service and good vibes. The date on her post matched the transaction date exactly. I wasn't grieving anymore. The tears were a distant memory. My mind was sharp, focused. They thought they had won. They thought I was broken. But every piece of paper, every screenshot, every detail I uncovered was a brick in a wall I was building, a wall that would eventually come crashing down on them. Later that evening, I was in the kitchen, getting a glass of water, when I heard Lacey's voice from the living room. She was on the phone, her voice low, conspiratorial. Yeah, Ashton, I know, but it's fine. We still have enough. The leftover money from Scarlett's little windfall will cover it. Maldives, here we come! My hand froze on the water tap. Maldives. Honeymoon. Soon. The words hit me like a physical blow, but instead of pain, there was a surge of icy resolve. They were planning to use my money for their dream vacation. My stolen future, their luxury. A small, dangerous smile touched my lips. Oh, it was happening soon, all right. Just not in the way they imagined. The pretense was exhausting. Every forced smile, every neutral response, every time I bit back a sharp retort when Lacey, 31, made a snide comment about her new budget for the wedding. It had been a few days since my visit to Ruby, a few days since I'd overheard the Maldives comment. The information I'd gathered was burning a hole in my pocket, but I knew I couldn't show my hand. Not yet. I decided to test Cassandra, 57. One evening she was complaining about a bill, something about the water heater. It's just so much, Scarlett, she sighed dramatically, throwing her hands up. You know, if we had a little extra, things wouldn't be so tight. She looked at me pointedly. I took a deep breath. Well, Mom, if my settlement hadn't disappeared, maybe I could have helped. It was supposed to be for my future, you know. Her eyes narrowed and her face hardened instantly. Oh, here we go again. Still being dramatic about that? We've been over this, Scarlett. You owe us. For everything. For keeping a roof over your head all these years, for taking care of you after your accident. Do you have any idea what we went through? The familiar script. It was always the same. A wave of nausea washed over me, remembering all the times she'd pulled this stunt. After the accident, when I was 19, she'd been a master of public performance. She'd set up a GoFundMe, tearfully telling church members and distant relatives about her poor, injured daughter and the unbearable medical bills. People sent money, casseroles, cards. Sympathy poured in. But the GoFundMe total, which I'd peeked at once, had been over $5,000. Where did it all go? My medical bills were covered by the other driver's insurance, and the settlement was for pain and suffering. The GoFundMe money had just vanished, just like my settlement now. I'm just saying it was a lot of money, I tried again, keeping my voice low. Cassandra scoffed, and we deserved it. Honestly, Scarlett, I'm grateful you finally stopped being dramatic about it. Lacey even gave me $2,000 as a thank you for letting her use it. See? She appreciates what we do for her. Unlike some people. She gave me a smug, knowing look, as if Lacey's generosity somehow validated the theft. The $2,000 was a drop in the bucket compared to the $12,000, but it showed Cassandra was directly benefiting. That was it. The last shred of doubt, of hope, that maybe, just maybe, they had some twisted logic I could understand, evaporated. They were beyond redemption, and they were never going to admit what they did. I went back to my room, the smugness in Cassandra's voice echoing in my ears. I pulled out my old phone, a cheap burner I'd kept in a drawer. I downloaded a voice recording app. From now on, every conversation with them was going to be documented. Every belittling comment, every gaslighting remark, every casual admission of their entitlement. It might not be admissible in court in some states without their knowledge, but it would be invaluable for my own records, for building my case, for proving a pattern of abuse. Later that night, I pulled up my contacts. I scrolled past the few friends I still had, people who had drifted away over the years as I became more isolated. My finger paused on a name I hadn't called in years. Rhett Bennett, my late father's distant cousin. He was 32, a few years older than Lacey, a mechanic who owned his own small garage on the outskirts of town. He and my dad had been close, but after Dad died, Cassandra had systematically alienated him, claiming he was trouble. I hadn't seen him since I was about 16. I hesitated, then pressed call. It rang twice, then a gruff voice answered. Bennett's Auto, Rhett speaking. Rhett? It's Scarlett Rivera. There was a beat of silence. Scarlett? Wow, haven't heard from you in years. Everything okay? His voice was cautious but not unkind. Not really, no, I admitted, my voice dropping to a whisper. Look, I need some advice. Legal advice. Sort of. I'm trying to figure out how to legally press charges for financial abuse. And maybe, like, theft. But it's complicated. It's family. Another pause. I could almost hear him processing it. Financial abuse, huh? That's heavy. And family makes it messier than a blown gasket. Look, I'm not a lawyer, Scarlett. You know that. But I know some people. And I've seen enough messed up family situations to know they can get ugly. Tell you what, why don't you come by the shop tomorrow? After closing, say 5? We can talk without interruptions. Thank you, Rhett, I said, a wave of relief washing over me. Thank you so much. I'll be there. Hanging up, I felt a tiny spark of hope. Rhett was a long shot, but he was a connection to a part of my family that wasn't toxic. He was an outsider, someone who might actually listen. And for the first time, I wasn't just planning revenge. I was planning justice. The next day felt impossibly long. I spent it mostly in my room, pretending to read, but actually sifting through the bank statements Ruby had given me, cross-referencing them with my own memories and the few social media posts Lacey, 31, hadn't deleted. Lacey was a digital exhibitionist, and it was her undoing. Her friend, Savannah Roberts, 24, was just as bad. Savannah, unknowingly, was my most valuable asset. She posted everything. A picture of Lacey at a bridal boutique, trying on dresses. OMG, say yes to the dress. A Lacey Rivera, the caption read. The date on the post? Just 2 days after my account was drained. I found a transaction on my bank statement. A $500 bridal consultation fee. Another post showed Lacey and Ashton, 33, at a fancy restaurant, clinking champagne glasses. Honeymoon planning, Maldives, here we come. That one was dated the same day as a $1,500 travel agency deposit on my statement. Spa weekends, new clothes, expensive dinners, all in the week following the theft. It was all there, laid out like a breadcrumb trail. At 4:45 p.m., I slipped out of the house, telling Cassandra, 57, I was going for a walk. She barely grunted a reply. The bus ride to Rhett's garage was quiet. The sun was starting to dip, casting long shadows. Bennett's auto was exactly as I remembered it. A dusty old brick building with a couple of beat-up cars parked outside. Rhett, 32, was wiping grease from his hands with a rag when I walked in. He looked older than I remembered, a few lines etched around his eyes, but his gaze was still kind. Scarlett, glad you made it. Thanks for seeing me, I said, sitting on an overturned tire. No problem. So, financial abuse, huh? That's a nasty one, especially when it's family. You got any proof? I pulled out the folder I'd prepared, the bank statements with Ruby's highlights, the screenshots of Lacey's social media posts, the spa receipt, the bridal boutique charge, the travel agency deposit. I even had a printout of the GoFundMe page from 7 years ago, showing the total raised. Rhett went through it all, his brow furrowed deeper with each page. So, they just took your settlement, and your mom admits it? She says I owe them, I explained, my voice tight. For raising me, for the accident. Lacey says the same, and the GoFundMe money from years ago, it just vanished. I never saw a dime of it. My medical bills were covered by insurance. Rhett leaned back, rubbing his chin. That GoFundMe thing, that's interesting. You know, your dad, he was a smart man, always planning ahead. He actually set up something for you, years ago, before he got sick. He had some bonds. Modest, nothing huge, but enough to give you a head start when you turned 18. He told me about it, said he wanted to make sure you were taken care of. My heart pounded. Bonds? What bonds? Cassandra always said he didn't leave anything, that we were barely scraping by. Rhett shook his head. That's a lie. He had them. He told me he put them in your name, but that your mom was supposed to hold on to them until you were ready. Said he wanted you to have a nest egg. I remember him saying he specifically told Cassandra not to touch them. He paused, a thoughtful look on his face. Actually, I think Lacey even helped her cash some of them out a few years back. Said it was for family emergencies. I remember thinking it was odd because your dad was so clear about them being for you. The pieces clicked into place. Not just my settlement, not just the GoFundMe. Years of manipulation. Years of being told I was a burden, while they systematically stripped away anything that was meant for my future. Lacey, 31, had helped Cassandra, 57, cash out my inheritance. It was a pattern, a deep-seated rot. So Lacey helped her cash them out? I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. Yeah, I remember because she called me asking about the process, said Mom needed help with some old papers. I told her to be careful, those were for you. Guess she wasn't. Rhett shook his head again. This is worse than I thought, Scarlett. This isn't just theft. This is a pattern, and it sounds like it goes way back. He picked up one of the bank statements, looking at the online transfer. This transfer of $11,000. Where did it go? Ruby couldn't tell me the account name, but she said it went to another bank, I explained. Rhett squinted at the statement. Wait a minute. This account number, it looks familiar. It's not a personal account, it's a creditor. I recognized the routing number for a local collection agency. My brother had some trouble with them a few years back. He typed something into his phone, then looked up, his eyes wide. Scarlett? This transfer? It paid off a debt, a big one, over $8,000, in Cassandra's name. My stomach dropped. The revelation hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just for Lacey's wedding and honeymoon. It was for Cassandra's debts. My money. Paying for their lavish lifestyle and their financial irresponsibility. The "we deserve it for raising you" wasn't just an excuse, it was a justification for a lifetime of taking. She owed money? I asked, my voice flat. Looks like it, Rhett confirmed, showing me his phone screen. An old credit card debt, looks like. Charged off, then sold to a collection agency, paid in full last week. I stared at the screen, a cold fury rising within me. They hadn't just stolen my money. They had used it to erase their own mistakes, their own financial failures, and they had done it with a smile, while telling me I was nothing but a drain on their lives. This wasn't just about $12,000 anymore. This was about everything. The information about Cassandra's 57 debt and the stolen bonds from my father hit me harder than the initial theft. It wasn't just about the $12,000 anymore. It was about a lifetime of calculated deceit, of being systematically stripped of my future by the very people who claimed to love me. The next morning, I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The quiet fury had solidified into something cold and unyielding. I spent the next few days meticulously organizing everything. The bank statements, the screenshots of Lacey's, 31 and Savannah's, 24, social media posts, the spa receipt, the bridal boutique charge, the travel agency deposit, the proof of Cassandra's debt payoff. I even had a copy of the GoFundMe page from 7 years ago, showing the raised amount that had vanished. Rhett, 32, had helped me find a public record of my father's, who passed away when I was 16, estate, confirming the existence of the bonds, though proving they were specifically for me would be harder without his will. Still, it added to the pattern. On Thursday, I called Ruby, 29, at the bank. Hi Ruby, it's Scarlett. I just wanted to thank you again for your help the other day. I've gathered all the information, and I'm ready to file a formal fraud report. Would you be able to assist me with that? Ruby's voice was immediately supportive. Of course, Scarlett. I can help you fill out the necessary forms and make sure everything is documented correctly for the bank's internal investigation. We take fraud very seriously. I went to the bank that afternoon. Ruby walked me through the process, her expression grim as she reviewed my carefully organized folder. This is incredibly thorough, Scarlett, she said, her voice low. The digital signature mismatch, the IP address, the matching social media posts. This is strong evidence. She helped me complete the bank's official fraud affidavit, signing off on it as a witness. What's the next step after this? I asked. Once the bank's internal investigation confirms the fraud, we'll forward our findings to law enforcement, Ruby explained. But you can also file a police report directly. Given the amount, and the clear evidence you have, I'd recommend doing that sooner rather than later. The following morning, armed with the bank's fraud report and my own meticulously compiled evidence, I walked into the local police station. I asked to speak to someone about financial fraud. I was directed to Detective Susan Washington. She was in her 40s, with a no-nonsense demeanor and sharp, intelligent eyes. Scarlett Rivera, I introduced myself, sitting across from her desk. I'm here to report a felony theft and financial fraud. I laid out my folder. Detective Washington, 40s, listened patiently, her expression unreadable, as I recounted everything. The car accident, the settlement, the drained account, Lacey's, 31, and Cassandra's, 57, confessions, the spa receipt, the club charges, the wedding and honeymoon deposits, the GoFundMe, the stolen bonds, and finally, Cassandra's personal debt being paid off with my money. I showed her the bank's fraud affidavit, Ruby's notes on the digital signature mismatch, and the social media evidence. As I spoke, I watched her eyes widen, just slightly. When I finished, she picked up the bank statements, then the social media printouts. So, your sister and your mother stole your $12,000 settlement, used it for a wedding, a honeymoon, and to pay off your mother's personal debts, and then admitted it, claiming you owed them. Yes, detective, I confirmed, my voice steady. And they've been doing similar things for years, like with the GoFundMe and my father's inheritance. She leaned back in her chair, a thoughtful look on her face. Ms. Rivera, I have to say, this is some of the most comprehensive documentation I've seen for a case like this. The bank's affidavit, the digital signature evidence, the matching transactions to public social media posts. This is strong. Theft exceeding $10,000 is classified as a felony in this state. And based on what you've presented, it appears we have a clear case of felony theft and potentially other fraud charges. A wave of cold satisfaction washed over me. Felony. That word tasted sweet. We'll open an official investigation immediately, Detective Washington continued. We'll need to interview your sister and mother and get statements from the bank. Do you have any idea when your sister and her fiancé are planning to leave for this honeymoon? I overheard Lacey mention the Maldives, I said. And she said soon. I saw a travel agency deposit on my statement. They're getting married in a few weeks, so I assume the honeymoon is right after. Okay, she said, making a note. We'll need to move quickly then. We don't want them to become flight risks. I nodded. I can tell you exactly when they're leaving. I'll make sure I know. As I left the police station, a quiet resolve settled over me. The game was on. I pulled out my phone. It was old, slow. I needed something better for what I had planned. I walked into the nearest electronics store and quietly upgraded my phone, making sure it had excellent video capabilities. Later that evening, I scheduled a discreet post on my social media. A simple image, a single empty chair on an airplane looking out at the clouds. The caption, "Sometimes karma rides coach." I set it to private for now, but I knew exactly when I would make it public. Just as Lacey and Ashton, 33, were about to board their flight, I would be there, I would watch, and I would film. The wedding was a blur of forced smiles and cloying sweetness. Lacey, 31, looked radiant in her expensive dress, Ashton, 33, beside her, looking smug. Cassandra, 57, beamed, playing the doting mother. I played my part too. The supportive little sister, quiet and unassuming, just happy for them. No one suspected a thing. My phone, the new one, was always within reach, its video capabilities ready. The honeymoon was scheduled for 2 days after the wedding. Lacey had been insufferable, rattling off details about the Maldives, the overwater bungalows, the private dinners. "It's going to be epic, Scarlett," she'd crowed. "You should really try to save up and go somewhere nice sometime." "Oh, wait," she'd laughed, and Cassandra had joined in. I just smiled, a cold, unreadable expression. The morning of their flight arrived. I had confirmed the flight details through a casual conversation with Lacey a few days prior. She was so excited, she practically gave me their itinerary. I knew their flight number, their departure time, and even their gate. I'd passed all this information to Detective Washington, 40s, a day earlier. She'd simply said, "Understood, Ms. Rivera." "We'll handle it." I packed a small duffel bag, just a few changes of clothes, my journal, and the folder with all my evidence. I wasn't coming back to this house, not after today. Lacey, Ashton, and Cassandra were buzzing with excitement. Suitcases were lined up by the door. Lacey was in a brand new designer tracksuit, Ashton in a matching one. Cassandra was wearing her traveling outfit, a beige pantsuit she saved for special occasions. "Are you sure you don't want to come to the airport, Scarlett?" Cassandra asked, feigning concern. "It's a big day for your sister." "No, I'm good," I said, my voice calm. I was wearing a simple dark hoodie and jeans, blending into the background. "I already booked a ride for myself. I'll just meet you there. I don't want to crowd the car." It was a lie, of course. My ride was for me, and me alone, and it was scheduled to arrive just after theirs. A few minutes later, Lacey and Ashton piled into Ashton's sleek black car, their luggage filling the trunk. Cassandra got into the passenger seat. They waved, oblivious, as Ashton backed out of the driveway. I watched them go, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching my lips. Then a dark sedan pulled up to the curb. It wasn't a taxi or a rideshare. It was unmarked, but I knew. I opened the back door and slid in. "Airport, please," I said to the driver, a quiet man in a suit. He nodded, and we pulled away. The drive was silent. My heart was thumping, a steady, powerful drumbeat against my ribs. I felt no fear, no regret, only a fierce, burning anticipation. We arrived at the airport. I told the driver to drop me off a little distance from the main terminal entrance, near the short-term parking garage. I stepped out, pulling my hoodie up over my head, and walked towards the entrance, my eyes scanning the crowd. It didn't take long to spot them. Lacey, Ashton, and Cassandra were standing near the curb, unloading their luggage, laughing. Lacey was already taking selfies. Ashton was checking his watch. They looked like the picture of a happy, prosperous family about to embark on a dream vacation. I pulled out my phone, subtly activating the video recorder. I kept it low, pointed generally in their direction, but not obviously filming. I walked slowly, deliberately, towards them, my eyes fixed on Lacey's face. Just as I was about 20 feet away, a dark SUV pulled up sharply behind Ashton's car, blocking it in. Then another and another. 3 unmarked police cruisers. Doors opened and uniformed officers, led by Detective Washington 40s, stepped out. Chaos erupted. "Police! Stay where you are!" Detective Washington's voice cut through the airport noise. Lacey shrieked, dropping her phone. Cassandra's face went white. Ashton, 33, froze, his eyes darting frantically. "What is this?" Cassandra shrieked, her voice shrill. "You can't do this! We're about to miss our flight!" Detective Washington walked directly towards Lacey and Ashton. "Lacey Rivera? Ashton Blake? You're under arrest for felony theft and fraud." "What?" Lacey wailed, her eyes wide with disbelief. "This is a mistake! You have the wrong person!" 2 officers moved to Lacey, gently but firmly taking her arms. Ashton, seeing the writing on the wall, mumbled something about needing to make a call and tried to slip away, back towards his car. But another officer was already there, blocking his path. "Cassandra Rivera?" Detective Washington turned to my mother. "You're also being detained for questioning in connection with these charges." Cassandra screamed, a guttural, enraged sound. "You can't! I'm her mother! This is outrageous! Scarlett, tell them!" "Tell them this is a mistake." I stood there just a few feet away, my face impassive. My phone was still recording. The chaos around me was a symphony. Cassandra's shrieks, Lacey's panicked demands for a lawyer, Ashton's futile attempts to escape. An officer began reading Lacey her rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Lacey's eyes, wide and tear-filled, met mine across the bustling airport terminal. She saw me then, standing there, calm, in my dark hoodie, phone in hand. The realization dawned on her face, a dawning horror. She opened her mouth, a choked sob escaping. "Scarlett, you—" I cut her off, my voice a low, almost inaudible whisper, just for her. "Bon voyage, Lacey." The officer finished reading her rights. Charges include felony theft and fraud. Lacey wailed, a raw animal sound of pure despair. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. The wail Lacey, 31, let out at the airport was a sound I knew I'd replay in my mind for years. It was the sound of her perfect world shattering, a symphony of consequences. As she was led away in handcuffs, still screaming about lawyers and mistakes, I felt a profound sense of calm. The video on my phone, capturing her raw despair, was a trophy I'd never share, but one I'd cherish. Detective Washington, 40s, approached me. "Ms. Rivera, thank you for your cooperation. We'll need you to come down to the station to give a full statement." "Of course," I said, my voice steady. "I'm ready." At the station, I sat in a quiet interview room and recounted everything again, this time for the official record. Every detail, every screenshot, every transaction, every gaslighting comment, every memory of being called a burden. I included the information about the GoFundMe and my father's bonds, explaining Rhett's 32 knowledge of them. The detective took meticulous notes, occasionally asking for clarification. I handed over my phone with the video I'd recorded, though I knew it was more for my own satisfaction than for evidence. Given the flight risk and the severity of the charges, Lacey Rivera and Cassandra Rivera, 57, will be held without bail for now, Detective Washington informed me. Ashton Blake, 33, isn't directly implicated in the theft of funds from your account, but he's being questioned regarding his knowledge and benefit from the stolen money. We'll see where that leads. The family dynamic, which had been a carefully constructed facade for so long, was imploding. Lacey and Cassandra locked up, unable to manipulate their way out of this one. Ashton, caught in the crossfire. My phone buzzed constantly over the next few hours. Ashton. He called, then texted, then called again. I watched the screen, his name flashing, and felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just a vast, empty space where any lingering connection might have been. He was just another parasite, benefiting from their cruelty. I ignored every call, every text. He was on his own. I left the police station feeling lighter than I had in years. The air outside felt cleaner, the sky brighter. I didn't go back to the house. Instead, I checked into a cheap motel on the edge of town. It was small, a little dingy, but it was mine. No one could tell me what to do, what to feel, or how much I owed them. That evening, curled up on the motel bed, I pulled out an old battered journal. It was from when I was a teenager, before the accident, and then during the long, painful years of recovery. I flipped through the pages, reading my own words. July 14th, year of accident. Mom said I'm such a burden. Lacey just rolled her eyes. My leg hurts so bad. I just want to disappear. October 2nd, year after accident. Another surgery. Mom told the nurse she's exhausted from all this. I heard her. Am I really that much trouble? March 10th, 2 years after accident. Lacey got a new car. Mom said she deserved it for helping out so much. I'm still stuck here, still hurting. Every page was a painful reminder of how my pain had been twisted into their leverage, how my suffering had been monetized, how my very existence had been framed as an inconvenience. The tears finally came, not of sadness, but of a quiet, profound grief for the girl who had believed their lies. A knock on the door startled me. I opened it cautiously. It was Rhett, 32. He held a small, worn shoebox. "Hey, Scarlett," he said, his eyes kind. "Heard things went down at the airport. Good for you. I just wanted to drop these off. Found them cleaning out some of Dad's old stuff in the garage. Thought you should have them." He handed me the shoebox. Inside were letters from my father, to me, and to Rhett. I pulled one out. My name on the envelope in my dad's familiar handwriting. My dearest Scarlett. The letter began, dated just a few months before his death. I know things are tough right now, but I want you to know how much I love you. I've set aside some bonds for your future, sweetheart. They're not much, but they're yours. I've told your mother to hold on to them until you're ready, but they are for you, and only you. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not worth everything. You are my bright star. My vision blurred. Cassandra had lied about everything, not just the settlement, not just the GoFundMe. She had lied about my father's love, about his efforts to secure my future. She had taken away even the memory of his care, replacing it with the narrative of my being a burden. Rhett placed a hand on my shoulder. Your dad loved you, Scarlett. He really did. He always worried about you, wanted you to be safe and happy. I looked at the letters, then back at Rhett. The revenge wasn't just about justice for the money. It was about reclaiming my father's memory. It was about survival. It was about finally, truly, being free. The days that followed the airport incident were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and emotional processing. I stayed at the motel for a week, then found a small, affordable apartment on the other side of town. It was a one-bedroom, nothing fancy, but it had a window that looked out onto a quiet street, and for the first time, it felt truly like my space. The money reclaimed from Cassandra's 57 accounts, legally frozen during the investigation, was enough to cover a few months' rent and some basic necessities. It was a fraction of what they'd taken, but it was a start. Lacey, 31, was facing trial. Felony theft and fraud. Her lawyer was trying to argue coercion by Cassandra, but the evidence of her direct involvement, from the ATM withdrawal to the social media posts, was overwhelming. Cassandra, on the other hand, took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, likely to avoid a harsher sentence and to protect Lacey in her own twisted way. The details were still being worked out, but both were looking at significant consequences. The news spread through our small southern town like wildfire. At first, there was disbelief, then whispers, then outright condemnation. The story of my car accident settlement and how my family had stolen it, along with the details of the GoFundMe and my father's bonds, became public knowledge. It wasn't a sensational news story, just local gossip, but it was enough. Public opinion turned cold towards Cassandra and Lacey. The people who had once offered sympathy and casseroles now looked at them with disgust. Their carefully constructed facade of respectability had crumbled. I started therapy. It was hard, peeling back years of emotional abuse, of being told I was a burden, of having my pain weaponized against me. My therapist, a kind woman named Dr. Evans, helped me understand that what they did wasn't just about money. It was about power and control. It was about making me believe I was worthless so they could exploit me. I also started working part-time at the local library. It was quiet, peaceful. I shelved books, helped people find what they needed, and gradually, slowly, began to feel like a functioning member of society again. I started journaling again, too, but this time my entries were different. They weren't filled with despair, but with observations, reflections, and plans for the future. Rhett, 32, became a quiet, steady presence in my life. He'd call sometimes, just to check in, or drop by the library with a coffee. He never asked for details about the case, just offered support. He was family, but the good kind. The kind that didn't demand, didn't exploit. One sunny afternoon, a few months after I'd moved into my apartment, I was at the grocery store. I was pushing my cart down an aisle when I saw her. Mrs. Henderson, an old neighbor from my childhood, a sweet elderly woman who used to bring us cookies. She stopped, her eyes widening in recognition. "Scarlett?" she said, her voice soft. "My goodness, it's been so long. You look well." I smiled, a genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Hi, Mrs. Henderson. It's good to see you." She leaned in conspiratorially, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I heard what happened. About your mother and sister. My dear, I am so sorry. But I'm glad you finally got away from those devils." The words hung in the air. Those devils. It was a stark, honest assessment. And for the first time, hearing it from someone else, it didn't feel like a judgment against me. It felt like validation. "Thank you, Mrs. Henderson," I said, and the smile on my face widened. It wasn't a forced smile, or a fake one. It was a real, unburdened smile, the first one in years. I walked out of the grocery store, the sun warm on my face. The world still had its challenges, and the scars, both physical and emotional, would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. The silence that had once felt like abandonment now felt like peace. Maybe forgiveness isn't peace. Sometimes peace is just silence.